Thanks for coming along tonight. Ehud Yaari makes another welcome return to the Sydney Institute. He was here not so long ago and he's here again, and we're very pleased for that. He has family in Australia, so it's great that he comes to Sydney when he's not in Melbourne. So we're very grateful for that. I will introduce him very briefly. He's an author. He's the Middle East commentator for Channel 12 in Israel, which is Israel's most important television channel, and a senior fellow at the Washington Institute, and his visit to Australia has been arranged by the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, and we're grateful for AJAC. So our speaker tonight's topic is Trump and Tehran. Ehud Yaari, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, nice being here again, and I've got permission to take off my coat.
Could I just stop you for a minute, because
Sure.
We don't have our podcast on. Could you help me?
It's going.
No, it's just going just now. Okay. Ronald, do you want us to start again, or are you happy to cut for that?
We might start again.
Okay, let's start again. Okay, all right. Thanks for coming along tonight, where Ehud Yaari returns as our guest speaker. He was here a couple of months ago, but he has family in Australia, so it's great to have him back in Sydney when he's not with his family in Melbourne. And we're also grateful to the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council for making this talk tonight possible. Now, Ehud Yaari is well known to many of you here and to many others, so I'll introduce him very briefly. He's the Middle East commentator for Channel 12 in Israel, which is Israel's most important news and current affairs channel, and also a senior fellow at the Washington Institute, and the topic tonight is Trump and Tehran. Ehud Yaari, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, it's always nice being at the Sydney Institute. Thank you for coming. I'll offer some thoughts on the situation, and of course the central topic in the Middle East is Iran. But I will start elsewhere, because there is a new development over the past 24 hours. One of the Qatari princes have chosen to disclose something which was under wraps, and that is that they are considering concluding a non-belligerency pact with Israel. If it happens, and that's a big if, this is a major a sea change in the region. Why would they consider, let alone do it, such a pact? It's because the Gulf states, as well as other Arabs, have an acute feeling that they cannot count on the US support any longer. They feel, like many of us in Israel do, that President Trump is erratic, and God knows what he's going to tweet tomorrow morning before any of his advisors wake up. And they have learned the lesson of the spectacular September Iranian attack on the biggest, largest most important oil installation in the world, Abqaiq, Ruwais, the Aramco facilities in Saudi Arabia. A spectacular attack, not just the daring and the chutzpah to go that far, but the 20-something cruise missiles and attack UAVs hit their targets with an impressive precision. Something which has repeated itself when the Iranians chose to attack the American airbase, the single most important airbase of the American in Iraq, Ain al-Assad. And again, the misguided claim was that they decided that they have intended to avoid causing casualties amongst the American soldiers. But it's not supported by the analysis of the wreckage in the base, etc. That was again an extremely accurate attack. The decision of President Trump not to respond militarily to the attack on Saudi Arabia and then the attack on Ain al-Assad have taught MBS in Saudi Arabia and MBZ in Abu Dhabi and MBR in Dubai and everybody else that they better start looking for themselves, because the umbrella may not be there when they really need it. So they are seeking different ways. One of them is this potential rapprochement with Israel. What is stunning about it is that this is taking place, or this was released just after previous Saturday the foreign ministers of the Arab League have adopted in Cairo a decision to reject the Trump deal of the century, denounce it, and refuse to discuss it. That happened although the Gulf states, Egypt, to a lesser extent Jordan, Morocco, have told the Palestinian president, Mr. Abbas, in advance that they are not going to support his outright rejection of the Trump plan. In fact, they have given before strong indications to the US administration that they were willing to finance most of the $50 billion package offered in the Trump plan for the Palestinian economy, and they were willing to move ahead on the plan even if the Palestinians refuse. Now, everybody knew in advance that the Palestinian answer is going to be niet. You know, Mr. Abbas has spent many years in Moscow. He speaks fluent Russian. In the harsh Israeli winter, he wears all those Russian woolen hats. So it was niet, not no. The plan was intended not for the Palestinians. They knew after over 2 years of talking to everybody around, that's Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, other American officials, they knew where the Palestinians were heading. The idea was different. The idea was, why wouldn't we present a plan, and I'll say something about the plan itself, but why don't we present a plan which can serve as a platform for open, public negotiations between Israel and the Arab states, Israel and the Sunnis. And that's why the Saudis, the UAE, others were telling the Palestinians time and again, very often in public, more so not in public. They were telling them that the Palestinians no longer have a veto over the relations between the Arab states and Israel. They also have interests, and they are not necessarily identical to the interests of the Palestinians. And it's time for the Palestinians, this was constantly the message, it's time for the Palestinians to move ahead and do something, instead of protesting and screaming and moving nowhere. And if you see these days Arab social media or op-ed columns in the Arab press, you will see something that we haven't seen before. There is a lot of talk about the need to mend fences with Israel and do those things that so far the Palestinians' veto prevented them from doing. So even though at the last moment in Cairo, the Arab foreign ministers suddenly took an hour to switch, suddenly decided to vote for the Palestinian draft, rejecting the Trump plan. By the way, until an hour before the meeting, the Arabs were saying to Abbas and his people, no way, we are not going there. I think what have changed their mind was, number one, the very vehement rejection of the Trump plan by the two non-Muslim, non-Arab powers of the Middle East, Iran and Turkey, both Erdogan and Khamenei personally, and that felt a bit uneasy for them to take the opposite stand. And second was an ultimatum presented to them quietly by the weakest of all the Arab leaders, Mr. Abbas, who said to them, I have nothing to lose anymore, and if you do not come along with me, then I will expose you as traitors of the Palestinian cause. That was a bit too much. So they have adopted the resolution in the Arab League, which is known in Cairo as the garage. No one really takes seriously for 2-3 decades now any resolution passed by the Arab League. The second reason, as I said, was the ultimatum by Abbas. But in spite of the fact that they have adopted this posture of trashing the Trump plan, few things happened immediately afterwards. One is the leak by the Qataris, the ex-Prime Minister of Qatar, Hamad bin Jassim, a very important figure in Gulf politics for many years, who said non-belligerency pact with Israel, that's something short of a peace agreement. Tunisia, now under a democratically elected president, who is, by the way, very anti-Israeli in his rhetorics. Tunisia, the next morning, Tunisia fired its ambassador to the UN for making a very fiery anti-Trump plan speech at the Security Council, where the Palestinians, by the way, are unable to this moment to raise 9 votes. So they don't even get to the point where the Americans cast a veto. These developments are telling, and they are all motivated by Iran. They take into account, as we do, that according to the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, next year Iran can start modernizing its outdated army. As of today, the Iranians have an array of militias all over the region, over 250,000 rifle carriers. To put it like this, it's having a large arsenal of heavy, pretty accurate missiles. It is deploying missiles, not just Hezbollah, 140,000 of them, but in Syria. And they still have there what was not successfully attacked by the Israeli Air Force. They are placing now heavy long-range missiles in western Iraq targeting Israel. They can't smuggle any more missiles into the Gaza Strip or let alone the West Bank, but they are passing know-how for local assembly of more advanced missiles, etc. The specter of Iran rearming itself is horrifying for the region. I believe that it's a process that will take time, and there are constraints because of sanctions, etc. However, I can see China stepping in for the first time as of next year to play an active role in Middle Eastern affairs. Not just trade and buy businesses in Israel as well as in the Arab world, not just having a Middle East envoy, they have one, who is going through the capitals but never makes statements. They are going to become players. And the deal would be simple. Russia cannot extend credit line to Iran, not in a substantial way. China can. And China would offer them, I'm not guessing here, it's a bit more than guesswork. And China would offer them copies of Russian systems produced in China, and in return, they would like to get the job of drilling and exploring for more oil and gas in Iran, bearing in mind that since '79, there was no real effort to extract more of the reserves that exist on Iranian land and in its water in the Persian Gulf. That would position China in a different place. That would position Iran in a different place. Because today, there is no Iranian army to speak of. Their fleet of tanks, of aircraft, etc. All those systems are outdated, not really functional. They are still flying F-5s and Phantoms. For those of you who remember from the '73 war, few Mirages that they got from Saddam in the '80s. Nothing, they have some more, but nothing else in substantial number. So that's what people in the Middle East are quietly focused on. Are we going to see an emergence, gradually of course, of Iranian modern army? Here came the decision of Trump, surprising as almost always, to knock off General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Quds Force. I've been following, I never met him of course, but I've been following him as close as I could since '93, before he assumed command of the Quds Force. And that Friday, when he was killed outside Baghdad airport, I said on Israeli television, and for an Israeli to say this to a Jewish audience is, you have to contemplate it. I said that I would compare the elimination of Soleimani to the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich in Prague in '42 by the Czech underground, assisted by the predecessors of the CIA, American agents. Why? Heydrich was the guy, the Wannsee Conference, etc., who planned for Hitler. How do you go about implementing your vision of destroying European Jewry How do you do that? How do you kill so many people in an efficient manner without diverting too much resources from the war effort on two fronts? Heydrich's plan persisted after him, as we all know. Qasem Soleimani was the only guy in our history who came up with a plan, not a slogan. We know the slogans. Death to Israel, death to America, etc. But he came up with a plan of how to go about it. A coherent, cohesive, implementable plan of how to gradually reach the point when you can really threaten the very existence of the State of Israel. And he was engaged himself 24/7 in putting the different pieces in place. He was not a general sitting in an office and issuing commands. He was in the field all the time, all over the place, dealing with the minute details of any militia and any missile unit all over the Fertile Crescent, and of course Yemen, etc. His plan was, still is, his plan was, we will build gradually around Israel a wall of missiles, tens and tens of thousands of heavy missiles. We will equip these missiles with the necessary kits, GPS kits, to make them accurate, so they can hit their target within 50 meters. We will raise armies of local militias, not Iranians. Iran did not fight outside its borders for 250 years. And Khamenei, who was like politically like a father to Soleimani and loved him very much, Khamenei stopped him when Soleimani brought a few thousand of Iranian troops to help in the Battle of Syria when they were fighting for the city of Aleppo, the most important city of Syria. That was a no. You can't go there. We don't want coffins in Tehran. But Soleimani was trying to tighten the noose around Israel's neck by making sure Lebanon is dominated by Hezbollah, by making sure Assad stays in power in Syria. He was the man who convinced our good friend Putin in the summer of 2015, over 4 meetings, to send the Russian Air Force to Syria. He was the one who worked day and night to make sure that the Iranian-sponsored militias in Iraq achieve prominent power over the government in Baghdad. Before he was killed, he was trying to force the Iraqi president, Barham Saleh, a Kurd, and the other Shiite politicians, he gave them a list of 9 candidates to become the next Iraqi prime minister. He met with resistance, but he was determined to overcome it. Except in this case, Barham Saleh said, I will resign, but I will not appoint any of them. And amongst the Shiites in Iraq, you have the emergence of resentment of Iran playing big brother to them. We have to remember, Saddam's army fighting Iran for 80 years consisted mostly of Shiite conscripts. Many of the divisions commanders were Shiites. So you have in Iraq, in recent months, you have Iranian pilgrims stopping to come because they are being attacked in the streets of Baghdad and Kerbala, Nasiriyah, Basra, etc. You have Iranian consulates attacked. You have people burning pictures of Slimani and Khamenei on the streets. There is a growing anti-Iranian sentiment. And Slimani was trying to deal with it by striking all sorts of deals. The question now is whether the plan of Slimani is going to remain in place and the Iranians will proceed with it without Slimani, like happened with Hydra. We don't know, I don't know the answer. We know that there are those in Tehran who were objecting over the past years to the huge investments involved in the Slimani project. They may feel stronger now. We see that the Iranians do not have somebody of that caliber to take over this project encompassing the entire Middle East. For example, Slimani was killed, and the Iranians do not have an Iranian to manage their interests and aspirations in Iraq. So they called on the leader of Hezbollah, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, and asked him to take over Iraqi affairs. And Nasrallah has a certain fellow, I'm sure he was never mentioned in any media outlet in Australia, Sheikh Ahmed Kausarani, who is now the point man of the Lebanese, the point man of the Iranians in Iraq. We know from our friends in Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad that they have difficulties finding the address in Tehran since he's gone. So it remains to be seen. One indication would be if the radicals, as they are called in Tehran, really go, as it seems, to try and monopolize power in the Iranian parliament, the Majlis, in the coming elections. If they do, that is, if they sideline all those nice, smiling, Zarif, Rouhani, etc., that is probably an indication, that would be probably an indication that they also intend to proceed with the Slimani project. A lot depends now on how the US is going to act in the region. One, everybody understands Trump doesn't want a war with Iran. What for? He generally would like Obama before him, different style, to disengage from the Middle East. We don't need Middle Eastern oil anymore. Those countries that are dependent on the oil and coming from the Gulf, they should take care of the security of the sea lanes, etc. But the focus is now Iraq. I do believe that the battle for the Middle East is going to be lost or won in Baghdad, nowhere else. If Trump bows to Iranian pressure that is still not there, but may come, if Trump decides to pull out of Iraq, he has 5,400 troops there, but mainly the air base and another air base, that would be green light for the Iranians and their Iraqi clients to move ahead. It did not happen. I know that it would. I hope it would not happen. Although I have a piece of information that yesterday in Canberra I was unable to find confirmation for, a very good source, saying that Australia, together with France and Germany, have notified the coalition that they would like to pull out of Iraq. It's not important in terms of numbers of troops, but symbolically, politically, it's very important. I hope it's wrong. Nobody in Canberra yesterday, people who should know, could confirm this. But in Iraq, it is that it will be decided. Hopefully, Trump will allow the experts around him, and he has some really good now Middle East experts handling policies in the region, very often managing to convince him to restrain himself. We hope they will be able to make him stay. For example, the Soleimani elimination, Trump didn't want to do it for a long time. It was always in the cards, except there was a new commander of the American command in the region, CENTCOM, General Frank McKenzie, who took over from General Votel, who used to coordinate with Soleimani during the campaign against Daesh, directly communicate. Messages, not talking, but communicate. So it's McKenzie and the new head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the US. I believe without these two, it wouldn't happen. So in Syria, for example, Trump decided to pull out, abandon the poor Kurds, but it didn't happen. At the end, what we have is, instead of those special forces that the Americans had east of the Euphrates River, we have other Americans, CIA, operational units, etc. There is no threat of the Turkish army crossing the Euphrates River to the east to destroy the, let's call it the Kurdish autonomous zone. And this constitutes the 2/5 of Syria, 40% of the territory, which are controlled by the Americans and their local allies, the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds. This is what prevents the Iranians from employing the land corridors that are central to Soleimani's plan. That is, the ability to move troops and weapons from Iran through Shiite Iraq into Syria in the desert, all the way up to link up with Hezbollah in Lebanon, get to the Mediterranean, get to the Israeli frontier and the Golan Heights. It's this few hundred American soldiers and their local allies that prevent the land corridors from being employed. Because the Iranians have to rely for the past almost 10 years on an air bridge to Syria in order to carry the weapons and the GPS kits and all the rest. And that is fairly easy for the Israeli Air Force and Israeli intel to track and attack. We had by now maybe 1,500 Israeli air raids, mostly unannounced, against Iranian targets and shipments in Syria. The question now is whether, if that stays, at least until the American elections in November, we have to assume that within few months, maybe weeks, the battle for the province of Idlib, the last stronghold of the rebels, the jihadists, will be over. I do not see that they have a chance to maintain it. I see the Turks, Erdogan, trying to do everything they can to help them, but carpet bombing by the Russian Air Force, together with the onslaught of the remainder of the Syrian army, may prove too strong. But a day after the battle for Idlib, by the way, we may have... We may have maybe 3 million refugees from there, and Erdogan may again open the floodgates to Europe, as he did before. But the question then would be whether Putin can be convinced, and the Americans are talking with him about it, the Israelis are talking with him about it, the Arabs are talking with him about it, to go for, crudely I'll put it, this formula. The West will shoulder the cost of reconstruction of Syria, totally devastated, in a way for the benefit of the Russians, who have turned it into their colony. Putin came for a visit to Syria, and he hosted the Syrian President Assad on Syrian land. It was amazing. And in return to the reconstruction of Syria, Putin will say to the Iranians what he refused to say so far: stop it. Get out. That's now the issue. I will conclude briefly by saying, if this happens, that would be another sea change in the region. Otherwise, I think both Trump, because he had so many hours with Bibi, and others understand that Israel and Iran are on a collision course, not tomorrow, not the morning after, but not in the distant future. And that would be a different kind of war than we have seen in the region for ages. Our experts in the IDF calculate that in such a war we will have no less than 300 red color alerts, missiles incoming, in Tel Aviv a day. And that would be a very fierce war, because both us, Hezbollah, the Iranians, the rest of them, everybody knows that it can take a war like this cannot take too long, and therefore you have to fire and drop bombs as much as you can, as fast as you can. I'll stop here.
Ehud Yaari for a fascinating address. We've got come to questions and discussion. I'll be operating this part of the room out. I'll be operating the rest of the room. There are a lot of people here, and we've only got just on 20 minutes. So we just come back here, just very briefly, questions and responses like this. With your scenario, does it make much difference if President Trump is replaced by a Bernie Sanders or a Joe Biden? Does it make much difference?
Well, I do think so. I do think that in terms of how Arabs and Israelis view the array of democratic candidates as it is now, they wouldn't be happy with a change of administration. One of the reasons is that the Iranians will probably find somebody to talk to about removing sanctions, minor modifications of the JCPOA, not much more than that.
Thank you. Stay here. Ida, just over where you were.
Thank you very much for such an interesting and comprehensive explanation. What do you think are the chances that Iran already has nuclear weapons capability?
Iran certainly has the capability to produce enough enriched uranium at this stage and later on maybe plutonium for a bomb. But the Iranians are not going for a bomb, they are going for an arsenal. Two, the Iranians are aware of the fact that once they go to cross the red line, then the Turks, he said so publicly, Erdogan, the Turks, the Saudis, the Egyptians, maybe UAE, everybody goes in the same direction. That's not the environment you want to live in, even if you are an Iranian IRGC general. Number three is a riddle. We know from the IAEA, from the Vienna agency, that as they put it, the Iranian physicists and engineers are best of the best. And it's true. But we don't know, and we couldn't learn this from the archive snatched by the Mossad from Tehran, quite a few ladies involved. We don't know whether they really mastered the art of assembling a bomb to place it on a tip of a warhead. That remains a question mark. Ultimately, they will.
Okay, this question here. Yes? Andrew. Thank you. Talk into the microphone.
As you know, we're in the 12th year globally of a very strong bull market in the share markets. For the year 2020, do you see local factors in the Middle East as having a possible significant effect on that bull market? First nominated fall or something? Do you see something 2020 that wasn't there previously?
So the question is, will the situation in the Middle East affect our superannuation? Is the question.
Stock market advice. No, I don't think that you will have an explosion in the Middle East in 2020. You have processes taking place, but I don't see an eruption in the Middle East soon. And if you ask me what I do, I'm very bullish.
Question down the back? Yes.
Hello, you spoke
Just speak up a bit.
Hello, you opened your discussion about the possibility of a non-belligerent agreement with some of the Arab states. I'm reminded of China. The Chinese script is calligraphy, which is very ancient and hinders their development greatly. And periodically, the Chinese try to convert to pinyin.
Okay, we've got to move through. Come on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Similarly, if an Arab state were to come to a non-belligerent agreement with Israel, then just as a politician in China would say, our culture is we have the old script. Similarly, an Arab politician might be tempted to say, our culture is never to befriend Israel. And I can't see that a non-belligerent agreement would ever survive.
Well, just a very quick response. He doesn't think an agreement would ever survive. But
Yeah. I think you have to take into account one major factor. Arabism has politically collapsed, imploded, no longer there. Pride of the heritage, the culture, especially the language, yes, all over the place. As a political vision, Arabism is gone. I have arguments with this, with Israelis, with Westerners, not with Arabs. They know it. And this is what is happening, that you have the Iranians and the Turks, the two non-Arab Muslim powers, stepping in to divide the spoils. That's what's happening in the Middle East. The truth is, the battle to defeat Daesh, which we all supported, of course, and rightly so, was in a way a war by proxy between the Iranians and the Turks. The Battle of Idlib now is a battle by proxy between Iran and Turkey. They are fighting, and I can go to Libya, but we don't have the time. They are fighting over the spoils of what was this great vision started by Lebanese Arab Christians over 150 years ago to build anew the Arab nation and Arab Renaissance, build modern functioning states, and rule the region and beyond. That is lost. I don't know that the Gulf states will gather the courage to do non-belligerency pact with Israel. But the Egyptians have the courage to maintain their peace with Israel and expand cooperation with Israel. Egyptian Air Force landing in Israeli air bases, Israeli Air Force attacking Daesh in the Sinai to help the Egyptians. We have a sort of an undeclared alliance to protect the sea lanes in the Red Sea. I don't know that we are really touching the prospect of a non-belligerence pact, but the degree of cooperation, not just military, between Israel and the Arab states has reached new heights. Mostly it's under the table.
Okay, there's a question down there, and we're coming up to Chris. Yes, speak into it.
What effect do you think the Hezbollah-aligned government in Lebanon is going to have? And how do you feel the people rising up on the streets against that government is going to have an effect within the overall Arab population?
In the interest of time, I think Lebanon is bankrupt. I don't see how they can save it. The new government under Hassan Diab is not even a puppet government run by Hezbollah and their local allies. And protests, if they persist in Lebanon, will ultimately be taken care of the same way they take care of protests in Iran. The order now of Nasrallah is to his people, don't act as if you are the police. Let's see if the Lebanese police, etc., army, gendarmerie can take care of it. But if it becomes a threat to their hold on government, they will act.
Chris.
Thank you. 2 points. What happens to Iran post-Khamenei, and what happens if the Israelis continue not to be able to form a stable government?
I think about Iran, I think we have, maybe we are lying to ourselves, but it seems as if it's a given that Raisi will take the place of Khamenei once he's gone. That's all the indications, although the guy lost his presidential bid, etc. He seems to be groomed for the job, and he's the favorite candidate of the IRGC, of the Revolutionary Guards. The other one is much more complicated. Because we have in Israel now, we are coming to elections on March 2nd, and there is no campaign. The only one who's campaigning is Bibi. But he is campaigning in Washington, getting the Trump deal released, trying to annex immediately what is allocated to Israel in the plan and then stopped by the Americans. Then he goes to Moscow and gets this poor girl who was sentenced for 7 years or 9 years for 7 grams of hashish in her bag coming from India to Israel, connecting in Moscow, and he brings her home in his own plane, etc. The other guy, Gantz, the ex-chief of staff, a pale figure, is doing everything he can to shy away from the microphones, from the cameras, not make speeches, no rallies. It's a non-campaign. His only message is, hey, you may not be sure about my abilities, but I'm not Bibi. I'm a decent guy. I don't see how any of the two blocks, the center-left, center-right, can win a majority. And then you have two scenarios. One, you will see a defection of the ultra-Orthodox from Bibi's camp to Gantz because they cannot afford to be outside coalition. They need the budgets, and etc. The other scenario is that Gantz may go to form a minority government which is supported from the outside by the Unified Arab List, the Israeli Arabs. That is very complicated because when you have to take decisions to bomb in Gaza, to bomb in Syria, to be dependent on the votes of Arab members of parliament would be complicated. But he may do it in the hope that if he does it, then the second stage will be the defection. Unfortunately, I do not see what would be best for Israel, which is a grand coalition between the two big parties.
Okay, we're going to be very brief. We're coming to the end of this question here. Just speak into it.
Are you aware of any movements, maybe underground movements, in Iran which would be happy to acknowledge Israel's right to exist?
Iran, in spite of the authoritarian regime, within certain very strict constraints, has a debate. And as the op-ed pages in the Farsi press are more interesting than the Arab press, or if you ask me, the Israeli press. There is a lively debate going on, but it doesn't really get that far. You have few people in Iran who are publicly saying, drop it. What interest do we have in fighting Israel? A famous professor, a friend of mine, Sadek Zibakalam, is writing about it all the time. They let him. But I don't see a strong current saying we should drop it, because this is the vehicle about which the Islamic Republic wants to seek and reach predominant position all over the Fertile Crescent first, and then the Gulf. So you have Zibakalam, you have a few others, not too many, not a strong current.
If China decides not to finance Iran, how strong is the Iranian economy to be able to finance their own rebuilding?
Our estimates, the Iranian economy under the sanctions is or was shrinking to between 7 and 10% a year. That's huge. Some experts believe that they are getting to a point where they may be stabilizing and reducing the rate that the economy is shrinking. We don't know. Much depends on the huge investments they are making in this regional endeavor of theirs. Just as an example, Egypt, just the beginning of this week, Egypt signed a deal with an Italian firm which has offices in Canberra. I saw them the other day for $10 billion naval units. We are in an arms race in the region, and the Iranians would not want to stay behind. They are behind the Turks, behind the Arabs now, behind Israel now. I don't see the Iranians accepting this inferiority, military inferiority, for long.
Final question?
Looking at it from Australia, and we do have our ups and downs in Canberra, but looking at the kind of political situation you've had in the last, 12, 18 months, who's running Israel?
Israel is run as a very peculiar system. When you have an interim government which cannot pass a new budget, then the budget is 1/12 each month of the previous budget. That means not much is being done. Nobody has flexibility to do anything. So the country is now being run effectively by officials in the different ministries, mainly the Treasury, and security issues, foreign policy, as always, single-handed by Bibi. Nobody next to him, nobody near him, solo.